In 1885, a German guy locked himself in a room and started memorizing nonsense. Not words, actual gibberish. Hermann Ebbinghaus figured if he used real words, his brain would cheat. So he made thousands of these words and tested them on himself. And in the end, he came out with a concept called the forgetting curve. This is a curve that measures how fast memory decays and how spaced repetition can be used to regain the memory of a particular thing. Fast forward to 1917. Arthur Gates runs a study on school kids and finds that time spent trying to recall the material beats time spent rereading it. So by 1917, we already have two things that work. Now jump to 2013. Led by John Dunlosky, finally sits down and grades 10 common study techniques by how useful they actually are. And only 2 were dubbed high utility. The same 2 found hundreds of years earlier. So learning was solved before your grandparents were even born, which raises a rather annoying question. Why are you still stuck? Well, fear not, my friend, because I'm going to teach you exactly how to use this knowledge. So this might look familiar. This is the Dunlosky list. So it goes from high utility to moderate to low utility. And as you kind of go up, you get into progressively more important and useful information. The thing that most people get tripped up on, and I think what is really important with things like this, is knowing when to use each thing, because each of them have their own use case. Like just because you got summarization and it's really low on the list doesn't mean it's not important and doesn't have a use case. In its own merit, it is very strong if you use it properly. Or even something like keyword mnemonics. You might have heard something called a memory palace, and essentially is a very good way of organizing groups of information and memorizing that very quickly. And so that is a very specific use case, but it is highly effective. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. So I'll work through this with you guys today. So first off, rereading. What is rereading and why is it useful? Well, it's not useful. It's the act of reading a book, right? Say book, text, right? And you literally over and over again, you read it. It's passive learning. It's one of Dunlosky's biggest findings is that passive learning is not very strong. It's very weak. And that's why it's at the bottom of the list. Rereading, you're not going to retain anything. And this doesn't just include books. This includes, PowerPoint slides. It could include even lectures, like if you're just constantly rereading or rewatching lectures. But rereading isn't completely useless. It's really good for understanding something. If you didn't get something the first time you read it, obviously you're not going to just go with what your notes are and just assume that that's enough. You should probably go back through it and understand what the text is saying for more in depth before you move on. So that's when rereading is actually good. The next one on the list is imagery. So going back to that book situation we had before, you have a couple ways of approaching it. You can, read it passively, not really focus on what you're doing, kind of go through it. You pick up a few things, but you're not really that engaged. Or you can do something called imagery for text. When you're reading, say you're reading a book about a boat. Let's say the book is about a boat. Yeah, and so say there's a guy in the boat. And he's, got his little paddle, right? And he's rowing the boat. If you're reading that in a piece of text and you're not thinking about what the guy is doing, like if you're not imagining the situation, it's going to be really hard for you to understand why what he's doing, like maybe the feeling he has in that situation. But if you're actively thinking and imagining the situation, it becomes a lot easier to understand why he's rowing the boat, what he's rowing, where he's rowing to, because you are more engaged with what you're reading. That said, it's not particularly useful for learning. It's not like outside of engaging with text, it's not particularly useful. Now, keyword mnemonics. I've compiled this massive list of all the different types of mnemonics. So I'll quickly brush through each. Then there's quite a few. Everyone knows what an acronym is. For example, PACE, pasta, apple, cilantro, eggs. So if you're going to the grocery store and you've got a list of things to remember, having an acronym can help remember that easier, right? If you're not going to write it down, that is. Acrostics, if I'm pronouncing that right, acrostic. An acrostic is an acronym's cousin. You're doing sentences using a mnemonic for each letter of the start of each word. So my very educated mother could represent Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, etc. And you can continue that sentence, and it all happens in the order that they appear in the solar system. So that's very useful as well. These types, again, they're not amazing. I would like to preface, mnemonics are a much more efficient way for your brain to memorize something. And so so the initial stage of learning, it can be very quick with a mnemonic, but naturally, the use case of it kind of slowly wears off. Once you get to a point where your brain has associated something with another thing, for example, a cell, like what a nucleus is with DNA, once it associates those two things, it doesn't need to rely on a mnemonic. So a mnemonic is something I'd like to call scaffolding. A mnemonic is scaffolding, and it's only useful in the beginning stages. That's why it's low on the list. That said, there's a few more things and a few more types of mnemonics that are very powerful that can help you get past that initial curve even better. So, for example, association. So let's say at work, someone new comes in, and we'll call him Todd. He's a co-worker and he's new. He might have a hat, he might look completely different, but his name is Todd, and you remember, hang on, Todd is my uncle. I have an uncle named Todd. And then so you might like link this new guy, to your uncle in some way. Maybe he's got the same sort of ear shape, which is very specific. Or maybe he wears the same types of ties. Anything like that, that is an association, and that's gonna help your brain understand and recognize, okay, this guy's Todd. And you're gonna memorize his name a lot more quickly. Number 3 is chunking, so breaking information down into sections. So say you have to memorize an entire phone number or a password. Let's say with this little digits here that I put, let's say these weren't here, these little things weren't here, and you had to memorize an entire chunk right here. You would find that to be very difficult. You probably couldn't do it, right? But if you chunk it and you get back these little dashes and you memorize this first, and then this, and then this. So it becomes IT2, 7FIL, F2, money sign, 7. Now suddenly because you're chunking, you're actually memorizing it better. And this is confirmed by a guy called George A. Miller, who's a psychologist. And so chunking is very powerful. We all probably use it to some extent. Number 4 is the most intriguing, is the memory palace. And this is useful in revealing large groups of information by hijacking the brain's spatial senses. And this is to be used on a familiar place. So at your home, and you're imagining each information organized in a very exaggerated and intentionally jarring manner. So let's say you're walking through your home. Let's say you've got a list of random things that you have to pick up from the store, like an iPhone, let's say a couple very specific types of clothing, maybe even a boots, let's just say. You walk through your front door and you see your shirt, this giant shirt hanging from a coat hanger on your front door, and this is the one you have to buy. Okay, so you walk through your front door and you go a little bit further, and then you notice this massive iPhone screen right where your TV is, which is really odd because, you know, your TV is supposed to have your TV, not an iPhone screen. And then you keep walking, maybe you go to the lounge area, or you go to let's say we go to the kitchen, and then you see your boots. And your boots are in a very odd position. They're hung from the ceiling fan. Very odd, but you see the exact boots. They're brown, they're leather, and you know they're brown and leather because only brown and leather have the little shoelaces that are thick enough to be able to fit on the ceiling fan. So it's things like that, and that's what a memory palace is. And so whenever you want to recall something, you walk back through your house in the same route, and you remember those very jarring, visually crazy things. Now, number 5 is songs and rhymes. We all remember as kids learning the alphabet, singing the alphabet. This is exactly what it is. They're very powerful, but I will say this is a very hard and annoying thing to do. Putting it together from scratch is a pain in the ass. Wouldn't really recommend it. But yeah, that's essentially where I would use the keyword mnemonics. Again, very specific, because they're for those early stages of memory, but they are incredibly useful at what they do if you use them properly. But highlighting, underlining. So I'll make this quick. So if you're reading through a book, you will inevitably find keywords or key phrases that you have to memorize. If you don't highlight them, it might be a little bit harder to memorize those things or know that when you're studying, okay, I have to go back and look at these things. Versus if you highlight or underline them, you know that this part, these like little texts or phrases or parts of the text that I need to learn is important, and you can come back and look at that and prioritize that in your study. So this is more of like an organization tool. I wouldn't put it past anything more than that. Now, but it is incredibly useful when you have to memorize big textbooks. Not so much in lectures, but textbooks are very good. Now, next up is summarization. Now, summarization's at the upper end of the load utility. And the reason is because it tests your ability to be able to paraphrase. And what makes summarization so good is it's a way of consolidating everything you've learned in, say, a lecture. So say you got someone presenting a lecture, or maybe you have, a book that you're reading. I know we keep coming back to books, but it's very important. Either way, in either of those situations, having the ability to summarize or paraphrase what you've heard basically helps consolidate that. It helps consolidate everything that you just touched on. Now, the part that makes it not very high utility is that when you're consolidating stuff, you can only consolidate as much as you recall. So when you summarize, you're getting these massive chunks of information, like massive, and then you're condensing it into this tiny little piece of text, and you lose a lot of that information. So while summarization is really good for getting the key words, the key points out, it does lose a lot of that data that you learn from your lectures or your PowerPoints, which is why it's ranked a little bit lower. Now, interleaving practice. This one is a bit niche, but there is so much science behind this that you would be crazy not to use this. So when you're doing tests, let's say you're doing math, you got like a couple questions like this, y equals 2x plus 3. Maybe you got like a quadratic formula that you have to rearrange or something, right? So you could probably group these together and then group this one together. And why is that? This is linear, and then this has like an x squared. Now, most people, when they go through and they do their practice, they will separate each topic. So they might do the derivatives in one section, right? And that's like, you might have like 20 questions on it. But then you might do the linear algebra, and then you're gonna only do like, I don't know, 5 questions on it. And then so on and so forth. But you do them in different sections. Most people do this, they do it in different sections. Well, interleaving practice is different. It suggests that you mix these two together. We're combining these two types of questions into A, single question, or B, multiple questions. So you're doing it all in one session. And the idea is you are essentially connecting different concepts, which consolidates your memory and understanding of each question more than if you did it on its own, which seems a bit counterintuitive, but it's because you're forced to understand it on such a level where you have to link it to something else. And that's why it's so good. Now, the next one is self-explanation and elaborative interrogation. I'm going to go through these together because I think they're very synonymous with one another. Now, these tools both have something in common, therefore finding gaps in your knowledge. Now, what is a gap? Well, so say you're learning something about the cell again, and we've got the nucleus here. We know that it's got DNA in it, but the question we have is, well, does transcription happen here? Do we transcribe here? Does the DNA come out of the cell at all? Maybe that's something that we're unsure of. Both of these things, to some extent, are a way of capturing that gap, that thing we don't know, and telling us that, hey, this is something that we got to know. We got to work on this and figure out what this means. How this might work in practice is elaborative interrogation. Unlike self-explanation, is you're going through and you're asking why. So you might have heard of something called the 5 whys. This is from Toyota. So essentially Toyota used this as a way to address problems. They would ask themselves 5 times, why did this problem occur? And it's to find the core leak of the problem. But we're adapting that today. So instead of asking for a problem, we're asking, why do we understand something? So again, coming back to the nucleus, we know it contains DNA. Why does it contain DNA? Well, it contains DNA because the DNA can't be out in the cytoplasm. Like if it's out in the cytoplasm, that's going to cause issues for the cell, and the cell, will cause issues. And like, why can't it be out inside? Well, it'll be hard, mitosis. Like the cell, the DNA needs to duplicate. It also needs its own environment. Well, why do we need mitosis? Well, for cell replication, right? And you can keep going, and eventually you're gonna find something that sticks out to you and goes, okay, I didn't know that. And that's the same thing for transcription. So it's like transcription. For transcription, you're just asking yourself questions. You're like, well, what happens in transcription? Why does this happen in transcription? How does this happen? You're elaboratively interrogating your own understanding of something, and that's the idea behind it. So you don't have to make up any practice tests or find any, because you can just ask yourself these questions. Now, self-explanation. Again, very similar. So let's talk about rainfall, right? So we've got the oceans and we have the land, right? This is the land, That's the this is the ocean, right? That's the land. Maybe the process might be, you know, the sun evaporates this, and then this comes up here, or the water vapor, and then it starts storming. And that's several processes, right? But at each section, what self-explanation is, you're saying out loud why each process is happening. So, for example, the sun. Why is the sun causing the ocean to evaporate? Why is water vapor going? And that's because, you know, it's emitting heat, and that's like exciting. And then the other thing is like, well, why is it going up in the air? Well, it's going up in the air because we know that gases, especially water gases, they rise, steam rises. And so you're kind of going through and you're finding out, okay, how much do I actually know about this process? Like, you're basically asking yourself, do I know this process? Do I know how it works? Can I explain every step? And it seems simple, and it seems like, oh, well, surely I already do this, but most people don't, and most people are ignorant to the fact that they don't do it. That's very good. That's why it's moderate. These are why it's moderate utility, because practice testing and distributed practice. You probably heard me talk about distributed practice earlier. What is it? To be honest, it's spaced repetition. It's spaced repetition. That's all it is. That's its entire use case is within spaced repetition. When you're doing spaced repetition, you're trying to reset that, basically. So this is like, this is like your fall off of knowledge, and then every time you check back, it gets a little bit, you know, the curve starts thinning out. Do you notice how this is much steeper than this, right? That's important, because it means that when we're memorizing things, we have to revise something many times early on. But over time, as we slowly revise it more, suddenly we have to revise it less, and we learn it more quickly, essentially. Like, we don't have to invest as much time into memorizing something because it's already in our long-term memory. This is basically the transition from short-form memory to long-term memory, essentially. Now, how does this play into practice testing? Well, practice testing is active recall, right? And our brains, we don't use passive recall, we use active. If you're trying to tell me that if you're at a restaurant and you're memorizing a list of like a menu, you know, maybe you're a waiter, you're never going to just passively recall it to someone. You're not going to just you're not going to transmit your thoughts of how the menu looks to the customer. You have to tell them, and you have to understand it. You have to tell them what it is. That's active recall. And what we were looking at before, like rereading, that's passive. So you need to practice for the thing that you're actually doing. It's the number one thing you should be focusing on is active recall, because it's the most useful. It's pretty much the number one way to learn anything. It's basically the only way to learn anything. And it includes so many techniques. I could go on forever. It includes blurting. It includes flashcards. Like, the list goes on. Anyway, guys, that is all. I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something today. If you want more study tips like this, or more study guides, or anything at all, feel free to ask me. I can make a video on it. And thanks for watching, for sticking around, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.